What is up? Happy Masters Thursday. How are we all doing? I've got the Masters hat on. I'm rocking it. Taking a quick break from watching Tiger right now to join you all to talk through some Underdog Superflex. We're not going to have too much time to talk about this. I mean, this tournament is flying. It's more than 30% of the way there. I've got about 30 drafts in. I think it's going to be for me to actually hit that 150. But I am still going to pump as many in as possible because these are very, very plus EV, it appears. And I think a lot of the reason why is just people don't have that much familiarity with this. There's not that much content out there on like how do you optimize, what should you be drafting. Even basics such as roster construction, I think are still kind of relatively unknown. And like from trying to actually study the game, like there's not that much actual data even available around it. I think some of the other sites have some that you can use from a Superflex standpoint because they have more, they have that more consistent. But even for this, like, I mean, for Underdog, it's probably, for the most part, like not worth putting in the deep dives that we see for other stuff because it's, the tournament goes pretty quickly. So what we've been able to do though is kind of, hey, through my experiences, through what I've learned, through what I've been leveraging, happy to kind of share those. We can talk through those today. Give me a little heads up. How are we doing? How's everything? How's everyone doing in chat right now? I'll put a link in chat right now as well. If you did not see it yesterday, I put out a mini little Twitter thread on kind of the 5 things that I'm noticing that I'm kind of, incorporating into my strategy for these Superflex tournaments. So definitely recommend checking that out. If you put that in the chat, if you're watching this later on, just go to my Twitter account and you'll see it from yesterday. Other than that, let's jump in a draft. And I think as we are drafting, we can then also, I can talk through kind of a high level, what those points were, why, just my kind of thoughts around them. And also obviously answer any questions that you all have around the big board Superflex. 500K, 100K up top, still very much worth playing. But of course, like very top heavy with the payouts, different between first and sixth, 100K to 10K. So we are still wanting to employ those strategic aspects around playing for first place. We are waiting for 10 people. Hopefully you guys can fill this so we're not waiting too long. But you know what? While we have to wait a little, may as well then, let's push this over to Twitter. So come on in, join in the fun. We'll have a very stream friendly, there you go, waiting for 5 people. It is moving. But while we do this, I'll head on over to that thread that I was talking about. And yeah, so I think I kind of just went through kind of some of the 5 tips. The first 2 were around the quarterback position. What I've been seeing, and this stems from a one-off tweet that I put a couple days ago, is it does not make sense if you so start off. There was a major disadvantage, in my opinion, from being in the back half of these drafts, just missing out on the top elite quarterbacks. You're already kind of a bit behind the 8 ball. It sucks, but it is what it is. Now, once we know that, we want to make sure like it does not make sense now to say, hey, I'm already behind on the QBs. Let me grab 2 QBs to try to make up for it. And you can see in this tweet, like, hey, some of the examples would be like maybe you go Trevor Lawrence and Dak, or Deshaun and Dak, or Trevor Lawrence and Daniel Jones and such. And because someone like Kirk Cousins, occasionally Daniel Jones is falling to those elite quarterbacks, like you're way behind the 8 ball and you're not catching up by just going with those 2. So I think what makes more sense is focus on trying to grab some of the elite players. Yes, you can still grab 1 QB. I'm not against that. I've got a decent amount of Deshaun Watson, got a lot of Lamar in my portfolio. But pairing it is probably makes sense to go for one of those running backs or wide receivers who you think, or tight end, Kelsey, who you think has a legitimate chance at actually finishing number 1 at that position. Because now when you have that elite upside at a positional basis, that's the best way to kind of hope for getting a little lucky. Obviously, variance needs to come in your favor, but catching up to those elite quarterback aspects that we have with those Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, pairing with the Cousins, pairing with the falling Daniel Jones, maybe Tua, and so forth. So there we go. Looks like the draft is starting. We've got pick 2. Love to see it. I'll quickly go through the others. Okay, so that was the one around the pairing. Other point around QBs is how many QBs you should be going for. I think 3 is almost always going to be too light unless like you really go QB to start off. Other than that, I'm usually aiming for around 4 to 5 QBs. Moving away from the QB aspects, think of these 2v2s that we talked of before. And I think, again, it's important to focus on looking for the elite upside rather than the safety in most scenarios. For example, a 2v2 with very similar ADPs is you can go Derek Carr and Aaron Jones, or you can go Tony Pollard and Jimmy G. Now, how much of a difference really is there between Jimmy G and Derek Carr if they both play the entire year? Maybe Derek Carr is like 55-45 to finish with more points, maybe 60-40. Not that much. And yes, if you're drafting Jimmy G, you're making a bet that he's going to be the QB for the entire year. And now you're getting situations where like Tony Pollard and Aaron Jones. And like Tony Pollard, without a doubt, has a lot higher likelihood of finishing as a top 3 running back on the year than Aaron Jones. So those are the things we kind of are considering. In the background, just a heads up, I'll flip back to the draft board in a second. But it looks like the number 1 pick is going to be taking Josh Allen. I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts over Patrick Mahomes. We can dive into why that is in a few. But to finish this out, the other kind of tips here. So number 4, I had these tournaments are only 2 wide receivers. And I think, there's some people who aren't even accounting for that at all and still drafting because they're so familiar with the traditional way of like, hey, I need to have a bunch of wide receivers. I should have more wide receivers than running backs. But that's not the case here. You can still, but it's not like a guarantee. And so one is obviously like wide receivers should be dropping more because from a positional scarcity standpoint, there's not as much of a fight to get all these wide receivers as there is when you need to start 3 every week. In addition, the other positions then actually increase a bit because the amount, like the percent of your lineup that is being scored by tight end actually goes from a skill position standpoint, 1/7 of your lineup to 1/6. It's only like a 2.5% boost, but it's enough of a boost that we should account for it. And same thing with running backs aspect, because now, hey, you're getting rid of one full roster spot. So the other positions do have more, they comprise more of your fantasy score. They're more valuable. So definitely worth considering that. I did a draft this morning where I think I actually went with 7 running backs and only 5 wide receivers because I started off with Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, and even grabbed another strong wide receiver early. And I was just like, hey, I'm perfectly fine. I only need 2 of these. And, maybe 3 with a, flex spot occasionally. And I had what I thought were 3 extremely good ones and, 5 very good ones in total. I would never leave a traditional underdog with only 5 wide receivers, but in this format, it makes sense. And the last one is, and this is maybe just specific to an ADP, maybe it's just an overall trend aspect, but like tight ends are virtually free at the end of drafts. And I think what we're seeing is like when we were looking at the 20-round drafts for Underdog traditional previously, you weren't drafting these backup quarterbacks. They were just kind of irrelevant. Here, people are taking chances on them. You've got like Jacoby Brissett going at ADP like 160 and such. And because of that, that means fewer people at other positions are going to be drafted. Now, I think the number one that I'm seeing the impact is at the tight end position, where in the 20th round, you're basically able to get your choice of Noah Fant, Tyler Conklin, Hunter Henry, all guys that from a projection are really not that much different than the guys who are going in the 13th, 14th round. So mostly I've been doing a strategy of, well, I understand that tight end is actually a little more important. So maybe I'm going to grab one early, or at least one early mid one. But then I'm almost always saying, hey, I'm not going to go grab 2 of those early mid ones. Instead, I'm going to wait and probably finish with 3 tight ends and grab 2 late ones as well, because there's enough depth and opportunity there. So that was the main thing there. As I said, I put the link in chat. Would really appreciate if you have the ability, kind of click on that, give the thread an extra like or retweet, share it. Appreciate that. Kind of helps spread the word. And when these get more traction, it kind of makes me want to obviously spend a bit more time building more of these threads in the future for other kind of one-off tournaments, best ball, whatever it is. Okay, let's head on over to the draft board. We are coming up, almost having our second pick. Let me pull up this draft board. You can see In the first round, 9 of the first 12 picks are quarterback. That is not that surprising. That's pretty much in line with the ADP stance. We grabbed Jalen Hurts. So I've been taking Jalen Hurts a little above Patrick Mahomes. If you look at the ETR rankings, you'll see that's where we have it as well. For me, it comes down to Jalen Hurts. We saw what he's able to do in the usage of the ground. And I think there's a possibility, not a possibility, there's a strong likelihood that the defense is not as good this year. Lost a lot of their key players, and they may have to actually, play into more shootouts, play into the fourth quarter more often. And I think Jalen Hurts is probably the greatest beneficiary of that, just because, hey, he may need them. They may lean on him a bit more and be more willing to let him run and extend those into those later games. And looks like, I don't know if it's official, I think it is, but it looks like they're not actually going to outlaw or ban the QB sneak Jalen Hurts play. I honestly, a couple months ago, I was thinking hey, that's actually going to hurt Jalen Hurts a decent amount because A, the offense becomes a little less efficient, less conversions on fourth downs, B, fewer touchdowns around the goal line, but it sounds like they're going to allow that to continue this year. And I think that's actually a major boost for Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense in general. So that's why I have Jalen Hurts ahead of Patrick Mahomes. Will not fault anyone if you have Patrick Mahomes ahead. The ADP does by a tiny bit. But there was a clear top 3 picks in these Superflex drafts. Okay, coming back around. We have Jalen Hurts. We are, let's see, trying to look to see, did AJ Brown went pretty early here, 17 to Saucy Bart. Okay, so we lose out on that stack partner. We could go Devonta Smith, but I think given this structure, it's a bit too much of a reach for me. We probably won't have him fall to us, but hey, it is what it is. Baby Stevie here is looking for the Stephon Diggs. If we let him have Stephon Diggs, I kind of like going Devontae and Stephon Diggs. And if we go Stephon, maybe we can grab Devontae as well. But I think we just go with Devontae here. Give ourselves maybe a backdoor to getting Jimmy Garoppolo later on, another stack there, except that he's going to go Diggs. And we're still pretty happy with grabbing one of these elite running backs to go with it. And this gives us an opportunity to say, hey, we are leaving the third round with arguably the top QB, top wide receiver, top running back. Obviously I'm not projecting Saquon or Bijan to be the top running back, but we have guys who could legitimately end up as the top at their position for all of those. We're really focusing on that elite upside rather than, okay, let me grab this second QB. Because another thing is when we start, we'll go Bijan. I still like Bijan more than Eckler, given the uncertainty around just the whole Eckler situation. He did come out and say that, hey, if nothing happens with the trade, he will go play and make a bet on himself. So, that's at least a positive. Not expecting a holdout or anything there for Eckler, but I'm still going to take Bijan. And yes, now we start thinking, in that situation, should we have grabbed a second quarterback? The way that I look at it for my second quarterback is my first quarterback, I want to have upside. I want him to have that opportunity to put up the 400-point season and just give you that clear advantage over everyone else's QB1. QB2, I often think about it more as, I don't want to, it's kind of like when we talk about running backs where when you grab someone like a Zeke from the last couple of years, you are paying just to have confidence of who your RB2 is going to be. When in reality, you should probably just plug and play and take the late guys because they're all going to be able to, whether it's best ball or if you're doing roster construction, you can plug them in and they're probably going to at least all together provide you with what that Zeke RB2 is going to give you. And I think similarly around quarterbacks where, yes, I grab Jalen Hurts. He gives me that upside. The Rodgers, the Genos, they give you that level of safety and security that they're going to get you those, 250 to 350, maybe 275 to 325, fantasy points. But, if you don't believe they have that true upside, is it really that much different than if we just say, hey, we're going to go with 3 QBs later on and allow us instead to focus on going with that elite, season winning upside with one of these guys? And so, yeah, Gino put up 314 last year. I think you can project him probably around something the same, or here, 281 here. So say 300, or say 281, whatever. Or you can say, you know what? Yes, later on, someone like that Stafford. How much of a difference really is Stafford to Gino if Stafford plays the same whole year, or Jimmy Garoppolo, or a lot of these guys down here, or you start getting guys down here with Trey Lance and Anthony Richardson who actually have like substantial upside that maybe Gino or something doesn't have. And so that's why I am not willing to, I don't want my QB2 to just be a confidence and security play, because those guys are getting drafted at the same time that you could be taking running backs and wide receivers that have like elite winning upside. Hopefully that makes sense. Doesn't put it in chat, I can help explain a little further. But that's kind of my thought on when I'm doing these quarterbacks aspects. How's it going, Ryan? Ryan's saying, yeah, Hertz has easy stack options too. Goddard later, maybe. Yeah, I mean, we lose AJ Brown. We'll see. Like Devonta Smith, I think already went as well. Yeah, Devonta goes here. So like, it's a little tough with Jalen Hurts to really, hey, when we know AJ Brown already, we didn't know actually AJ Brown went at this point. But like, it does feel like it's hard to kind of get the AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. Let's see what AJ Brown's ADP is. I haven't gotten that stack. I know our rankings have AJ Brown a bit lower. He's at 21. So yeah, a lot of times people will probably get that Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown. That's 21 ADP, falls right in line with where Hurts is normally going here. So that's definitely a good one to get. Devonta Smith, let's see what he's at 40. We go back to the board. So 47 is here. So he's a bit of a dead zone where like you don't want to reach at 26 and you're unlikely to get at 47. But hey, possibility that he falls, you snag him at that 46, 47, you get great value there. And then, yeah, Goddard, obviously later on, you can pretty easily get him just because, where tight ends going 86, lots of opportunity there. Oh, God. This is frustrating. Just noticing this. Jay Connolly, Deshaun, Dak, Russ, Gino. Okay. Worth talking through when this happens. So first thing is, once you notice it's happening, you need to adapt. Will it get thrown out as a draft? Maybe. It's possible. I know that they also are, as a rule of thumb, like don't want to just throw out drafts when someone does that, because theoretically Jay Connolly, I'm not saying Jay Connolly is doing this, but theoretically someone could be like, hey, I got the last draft pick. I hate that. I really wanted one of the top 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go hammer time on QBs and just draft 12 QBs and hope the draft is thrown out and I'll get a refund. And if they were then going to refund every single one, like obviously you need to, punish behavior or something. I don't know, but like it's not a guarantee. And hey, you know what? Maybe Jay Connolly is doing a strategy where he's like, I want to go first 4 with these. And then he's not going to draft another QB the rest of the time. And that's perfectly okay. But what I am thinking is, there's a possibility that he goes and drafts another couple more. He is a Red Badger. So like, maybe this is just a legitimate strategy. I just want to really own that QB position and I'll fill in everything else. But there's a chance that this creates a bit of an avalanche. And so I want to make sure that we do not get lost on the wrong side of it. But, oh, buddy, it's hard to really pass up some of these values here. So I'm going to grab the Derrick Henry. I have him a little tier above the ETN and Ramondre. So let's grab Henry. And now, from a second QB wise, you can grab Bryce, Trey, Stroud, Stafford. Lots of options here. Jimmy is down there at 70, so we can hope that he falls to us at this 71. But we'll see. We'll see. ETN. All right, Ramondre goes. ETN gives us a really, really solid 3 running backs. Mark Andrews gives us kind of elite upside at the tight end position, which I really like. I think we've got some options here. I think I'm going to prioritize a QB, though, just just because I'm a little scared of what's happening here with the Connolly and what impact they may have with others that maybe start realizing that maybe you get a bit of a run. I'm going to grab Bryce here. I like this. I do think Bryce has a little more, it's a decent upside just from a range of outcomes. Rookies often run a little more. We know Bryce can do a little on the ground. So also lots of potential kind of stack partners if you want to go with the Houston route later on, or Carolina if you think he plays there. So let's grab Bryce Young. This is kind of a reaction, as I mentioned, to we'll see what happens with the rest of these QBs. All right, let me hear it in chat. What how many drafts have you all been doing? Are you enjoying the Superflex? Leone put out a thread a couple days ago kind of arguing that for these Superflex leagues, QBs should actually be penalized a bit more, or their points should not account for as much. I definitely get it. I mean, you see we are 5 rounds in. I mean, in the first 4 rounds, how many QBs were taken? 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 in the first 4 rounds. And I think we're going to see substantial more in this round as well. It definitely feels like, hey, QB just is maybe even a little too important. I think when you're playing PPR, that Superflex actually occasionally could end up being another position. Hey, you have a strong week, especially if you only need 2 wide receivers. You could have 3 wide receivers go off and such. Or at least the gap between if you needed to use a PPR versus a bad QB situation isn't that large. In this half PPR, I do agree, quarterbacks are just very valuable. Now, should we change the format? I don't know. It's one tournament. It's not like this is, going on all season. It is a little different. It's kind of still fun. I think there's a lot more strategy aspects to it. But yeah, maybe if you did something like, hey, you needed 50 yards for a point for touchdowns, or 3 for a passing touchdown. It's hard to kind of customize that specifically to make it more challenging. Maybe you keep it 3 wide receivers. I'm trying to think how much that would change. I do think that would actually then push wide receivers up a substantial amount if you needed to start 3 wide receivers, and maybe as a result that pushes some of the QBs down a little. I don't know. I think it could over time. I think the immediate reaction would just be people just draft fewer running backs and tight ends. And it's just like hey, QBs and wide receivers, you need to get them early and get them good. But yeah, I mean, as we're seeing again, Bryce, CJ, Richardson, Pickett, Stafford. So we're at 40. We're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 45 through 5 rounds, averaging. That's a ton of QBs. But yeah. No, 45 is not the right number. 25, sorry. I was thinking 9 per round. That's not right. 25 QBs. So almost all the starters are gone in the first 5 rounds. Pretty crazy, but that's what you have to expect, especially when you have someone like it. And I think Jay Connolly, I've seen the name before, has the red badge. My guess is this is just kind of a unique strategy, thinking through hey, I'm going to just grab 4 elite quarterbacks and not grab another the rest of the draft. It'll be an interesting kind of, case study. We can review that one at the end to see what it looks like. It's not my preferred strategy because, as I was mentioning to begin with, Deshaun and Dak is substantially behind, a lot of the teams in this tournament that have one of these elites with a Kirk Cousins or a Tua or a Daniel Jones even. And then the next is you're guaranteeing each week that 2 of your first 4 picks are not counting in your score. I think that is a little difficult. You're eliminating your chance of really ever having the top running back, top wide receiver, or top tight end by doing this. It's tough, but hey, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And my guess is that Jay Connolly's kind of just experimenting to see what it looks like. So we'll play that out. All right, we're coming back around to us. From a QB stance, we've got Hertz, we got Bryce. Feel pretty good about those. I think we will still end up with 4 quarterbacks in this structure. depending on really what happens. But I'm okay with kind of waiting on the QBs and just saying like, hey, I've got Jalen Hurts every week. He's putting up those 25 plus points each week. And then between Bryce and whoever else I can plug and play will be my Superflex position each week. And there's a lot of talent in this area. Yeah, we don't have kind of the league winning, going to be a top one, top three at their position, but there's still a ton of talent here. And this is where we'll probably go with a wide receiver in this situation. Maybe Aaron Jones. I don't know. We'll see. From a stack standpoint, so to keep an eye out, we've got Goddard at the 86. We'll at least star that for later. I like Christian Kirk. I'm going to move him up just to put that in the waiting spot. So, or we could go Aaron Jones, knowing we could get any of these. We have Bijan and Henry. Think. Let's grab Christian Kirk. We'll grab Christian Kirk. And then, we've got these wide receivers. We have potential for Aaron Jones. Again, I mean, it's just kind of trying to think through it in real time. But it's a different strategy with regards to like we're used to. Hey, if I grab Bijan and Derrick Henry in my draft early on, I'm probably waiting very late on running backs because I've got two very solid ones, and then maybe I'll throw in another 3 in those kind of 8th to 12th round. Because I want to make sure that I've got, like, if I've spent that much capital early on at the running back position, that I really need to make sure I've got some elite wide receivers. My lack of elite wide receivers, I need to get some really high quality wide receivers. In this situation, I've got Bijan and Derrick Henry. I've also got Devontae. I'm going to count on Devontae just about every week, which means I really only need to fill in one more wide receiver spot and occasionally a flex spot. And Aaron Jones can very much be a core flex spot for me. So this is where it makes sense I'm willing to grab another running back in this spot. I'm willing to, in this one, I wouldn't finish with more running back than wide receivers, but it happens occasionally, or a decent amount. All right, sub. Let me catch up on chat as I've been going back through. Let me get the board back up so we can watch this and see what's going to happen. Real quick, let's do one more count. We had 20. We're at 25 through 5. Slows down a little. Trey Lance, 26. Jimmy, 27. We were hoping Jimmy fell to us here, but the Avalanche kind of prevented that. And 28 to Desmond Ridder. Obviously slowed down a bit because now we've started getting these QBs who have some question marks, and that's okay. Or it's question marks and lack of kind of, upside. Trey Lance obviously has the upside, but has the major question mark. Desmond Ridder honestly has a question mark and lack of upside. So that's where it's really starting to get kind of dirty. I probably would prefer waiting to when we get into the 9th or 10th round where there's still some QBs available that have, in my opinion, similar profiles as Desmond Ridder from a risk and expected point standpoint. Let me get to the chat. What do we got? It's crazy how big of an advantage having a top pick in this format. Yep, 100% agree. Top 3 picks have a major advantage. It's just kind of one of those things where it is what it is. But I think that's why it's that much more important to kind of say hey, if you miss out on one of those top 3, try to hit the elite upside in the wide receiver or running back that just kind of goes off and, makes up for that gap. The CMC years when he went crazy, Justin Jefferson last year, those are the players that I think are the ones that really can get a leg up on it when those years happen, get a leg up on the early picks. Nice. Yeah. I think it's a fun tournament. It's definitely fun to sweat throughout the year. Congrats on that 31st and such. Ryan again. So I've been drafting on Superflex and FFPC. Can't play in Underdog. Hopefully some of these tips, I like it a lot, the lots of strategy. Hopefully some of this conversation and discussion helped with a strategy aspect for FFPC. Obviously their tight end premium is a little more interesting. We'll see. I think it's a really difficult start to go for QBs to start off. Just a little too much kind of dead draft capital, in my opinion. All right. Dobby here saying, would like to see third round reversal. That'd be pretty interesting. In general, I don't want third round reversal, like for traditional best ball mania and such. But could you do it for Superflex? I think that'd be a pretty interesting situation. Yeah, because then if you're getting one of those top three, you're not going to be able to get Kirk Cousins. You're not going to be able to have the Daniel Jones, the Tua fall to you. You're at I think that'd be a really interesting proposal for Underdog. I'm going to talk to Rudnett about that for a future year, maybe a future Superflex tournament to see how that would work out. Because, yeah, I think there'd be a lot more fairness. Not fairness. Fairness is not the right word because it is fair because it's random. But more just, more opportunity for the later draft picks to compete in that specific draft is probably better said. All right, let's see. Yeah, I mean, so Greg is talking about how, seems like Underdog should add a rule that each team can only take X amount of QBs or something. I think it gets really kind of iffy if it starts kind of building in rules for what people can and can't do in a draft. I am a fan of positional caps, especially we see it for the traditional Underdog and such, but there's no reason a team traditional Underdog should ever have more than 4 QBs. Or at least maybe if you want to say 5 or something. But that's something where I'd be more okay saying hey, in a draft, you cannot have non-Superflex, the more traditional one, you can only have at most 4 QBs. Because that's the kind of thing that hey, you can very easily impact kind of tank a draft if you just go with 8 of that. Maybe you set a positional cap on just the onesie positions. I don't know. Just the extenuating circumstances, I could see that. It is difficult though if you try to start actually regulating hey, how many you can do in this situation. It's a bit too much guardrails for me. Okay. Still no tight end. Goddard went pick 90. Not too surprised. We were hoping he'd fall to us. I think his ADP we said was right about 90, right below it. We're going to hold off on tight end probably for a little, at least right now. Could go with some more wide receivers. David Montgomery. I don't hate, this is a decent spot to say hey, we could grab another QB or 2 even. So if we go Sam Howell, start with that. We go Mike Evans. Let's go Mike Evans. Going to grab Mike Evans, and now we'll see what baby Stevie does. But I think my thought process is that we're okay with grabbing just one of these QBs here. And I'm okay with, hey, if Howell falls to us, we could grab Howell. If Baker falls, we've got the Baker Mike Evans. If Tannehill falls, we have the Derrick Henry situation. So that's why I'm okay with, I think Evans is still a nice piece, and I'm actually on Team Baker at this value. He's being drafted as the 32nd quarterback in Superflex right now, when I think it's pretty clear he'll be the quarterback for the whole year, but barring injury for the Bucs. Maybe if they were to end up Will Levis was to fall to them, then I could see now there's maybe a little more risk at the end of the season that they would be playing Will Levis instead. But I think for the most part, Baker's probably going to be that quarterback for the year. And I'm not saying Baker's good or anything, but if you're able to draft a quarterback that's going to be the QB, we compared to Desmond Ridder, I think there's a better chance that Taylor Heineke gets playing time over Desmond Ridder than Baker Mayfield gets benched or such. Or not benched. That they have another quarterback that they're really trying to test out. It's interesting. I don't know. So that's why hey, I'm fine with Baker. I'm probably overweight on him and have been a bit just because I don't think he should be being drafted from ADP as the 32nd overall. I think something around kind of the, let's see, maybe around Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder 75. That feels early. I mean, maybe around like Brock Purdy or Baker. I'd probably go Brock just for the upside scenario if Brock actually has that starting job for the year. Yeah, I don't know. So maybe Baker should be in my mind going in like the 90s or something, that 8th round. All right, coming back around to chat. What do we got? I like Purdy as a late QB. I've even randomly found myself drafting both Trey Lance and Purdy in drafts. And I don't hate it. Obviously wouldn't do that for like an underdog, for a traditional one, but for Superflex, I don't hate it actually in a situation where I get like a really solid, first quarterback, and then I end up with like Trey Lance, Purdy, and maybe one late QB, and like know that, hey, I've got my elite guy who's going to push me forward. And then between Purdy and Trey Lance, like I've got a really solid QB there that I think, and kind of you're hoping that Trey Lance actually wins it. And then your Purdy one, you kind of miss that, you kind of just lose it. It may be a fool's errand. And like, hey, I'm giving up, value against those other teams that are drafting only the correct one. But like, I think there's also a world that they both, start parts of the year and like have success. I don't know. It's an interesting one. I don't think you're giving up too much draft capital in this format because the wide receivers and the running backs that are going around like where Purdy are, for the most part, guys that may be your starters, but may not. It's not like the guaranteed, not even a guaranteed starter. Are you maxing? I'm at like 35 or 30 so right now. I just don't think I'm going to have enough. I think it's going to fill before I have a chance because like I'm at 35 and they're at like 30%, but I would need to get to 150 before it gets to 100%. So my guess is that I just won't have enough time because it'll fill too quickly. But I'll definitely be going heavy on this and continue doing that. Yeah, this is also very, very fair. Lance gets traded and becomes starter somewhere else. Purdy becomes a starter there, and that is a big win-win-win for that scenario. I did not even think about that, but yeah, 100%. That's a great argument for drafting them both. They have in that trade scenario, they basically have leverage or shared mutual interest. If one thing happens, they both kind of share benefit. It's kind of similar to the Godwin Mike Evans situation in Tampa. If one of those two gets traded, that means that person who got traded is probably going to a better situation. And so that's an upgrade for that player. And then the player that stayed is now going to get increased volume, become more of opportunities. And so increased situation for that player. So yeah, the Trey Lance, if you think the trade is a possibility, definitely makes sense. We are at 3-3-3-0 right now. 3 QBs, 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 0 tight ends. I'm okay on the tight end situation. Nothing too crazy right there. As like for me to reach on. Let's see. So in this scenario, we are now saying like, hey, we have most of those kind of, I feel pretty good about what we have right now from like an upside standpoint. I think we still want to kind of keep hitting for the weekly and season long upside. James Conner on the board is an interesting one. I think James Conner's, the more we've heard throughout offseason that they didn't sign someone to Arizona, one of these veterans, like gives you a little more hope that James Conner could have a decent year. And I don't think his ADP is truly reflecting it, or we haven't seen like that gradual slowly move up. Yes, they could still bring in a Leonard Fournette, and Ezekiel Elliott, a Kareem Hunt, or draft a rookie. But even in those scenarios, James Conner, like we've seen them use him as a workhorse in the past. So I'm content saying like, hey, let's keep James Conner. The Will Levis situation, like I'd consider it where we are right now. But we've got the Jalen Hurts, and we're really just trying to fill in that second. I'm just a little concerned with Will Levis across the entire season. Like, could this just be a full redshirt year? Even if he does play, is he going to provide enough value? I think if we didn't grab Bryce Young and we grabbed someone a little later, maybe then we would have included Will Levis in this. but I don't think we're going to go with Will Levis with this. I think we still end up with a fourth QB, but it'll, in my mind, be one of these very late ones that maybe has like a chance at getting the playing time, which honestly is probably there's a couple of these QBs that are later that are probably similar likelihood of playing as Will Levis from a game standpoint, but obviously, or a little less, but obviously at a substantially cheaper cost. Let's grab Pat. Let's get our first tight end. I think that makes sense. All right. I feel pretty decent about this draft, but then again, anytime you finish with, start with the top 3 pick, I think you will often feel pretty decent about a draft. And a lot of that is because we feel pretty good about that first QB slot and not feeling like we need to really go heavy on the QBs, which allows us to get the elite aspects and Bijan, Henry, Aaron Jones, and then wide receivers, Devontae, Kirk Evans, all very solid stuff there. Who starts more games assuming full health, Desmond Ridder or Sam Howell? I think Sam Howell. My reasoning is I think Atlanta is actually trying to win this year and like has a decent chance to win the NFC South. You look at the competition and who they're going against. I mean, you got Carolina with rookie QB. You've got New Orleans with a very, very tough, just not great defense. New, obviously, QB. The team in general, like that salary cap issues, like there's a lot of struggle there in New Orleans. And then Tampa, I think that Tampa's actually, just trying to tank. It's interesting with their signings. Like they've let some key players go from a salary cap standpoint, from not wanting to sign a long-term contract in their current situation. Like I'm on the opinion that I think what makes most sense for Tampa is that, hey, you kind of suck for Caleb. Hope you get that number 1 overall pick, get Caleb. Or if Will Levis is supposed to fall to them this year, draft him and see what you have out of him. But why I bring that up is I think that Atlanta wants to win this year, has line of sight to actually winning that division. Yes, being run heavy. Yes, solid enough defense. And in that situation, if Ridder is not playing well, I think they'll be willing to have a quick hook to bring in Taylor Heineke. And so that's where and Taylor Heineke, I believe he made, I may be confusing someone else, but I think he might have got 2 for $10 million, like a decent backup QB situation with, maybe even getting some starters. So that's why I'd say there's more willingness to pull the hook on Ridder to bring in Heineke, where Sam Howell, I don't think Washington is going to be that great this year. I think, they're just not going to be competitive. That's a pretty tough division we saw last year as well. And so, hey, see what you have in Sam Howell. Give him a chance, because if they end up completely sucking, hey, at least you get that full year. You get more time of we know Sam Howell is it or isn't it going into next year's draft, should you be really focusing on kind of the QB's position. So that's where my thoughts are there. I think it's a good question. And then if we then think from a ADP standpoint, Desmond Ridder is ADP 87.5, Howell's 106.2. If I think Howell's going to play more games, that's something that obviously should come into consideration. I guess obviously I prefer Howell at that ADP versus Ridder. Straight up, it's probably pretty close. I'd probably just go with the ADP and Ridder, but I think I think the Howell. Interesting thought there. All right. The Pound asking, after the first 4 picks, let me get the board back up. After the first 4 picks, do you feel Lamar at ADP 9 with his rushing has the most upside versus, say, a Trevor Lawrence start? So after the first 4 guys, would I go Lamar for the upside? So someone asked me on Twitter this the other day, and I was kind of thinking through, because, someone was responding with it, hey, they like Lamar, and then pairing Lamar with another QB, just like happened here with the Daniel Jones, because they were thinking that Lamar is the only one in that group that actually has the ability to finish at that same level as the top 3, top 4 QBs. And I definitely get that. But in my mind, Lamar has substantially more risk than any of those. And I think his upside is not much different. It's probably pretty comparable to those 3. And so now we're saying that hey, in a best case scenario, you're just catching up to these guys who are also occasionally getting a Daniel Jones to a Kirk Cousins. But here you're playing for the best case. So yes, I do like Lamar, but I wouldn't take him 5 overall. I think I'd rather go with a Justin Jefferson or something there. Maybe. And like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm always anti the Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, that group that doesn't really have the rushing upside. But I'd say, like, I don't need to be way over ADP on Lamar to still get a substantial amount of Lamar this year. All right, coming back to us, we've got our 3 QBs. There's not a QB in this range that we really want to jump for. Feel good about running backs. I think wide receiver is probably a good one here. If you've been using the ETR ranks, the DPJ, Zay Jones kind of continue to rise near the top. We could go Dawson Knox here as well. I don't normally grab like 2 of these middle tight ends, but let's do it this round. Grab Dawson Knox. We'll grab then one of these wide receivers, assuming they both don't go. And now we can at least say, like, hey, in my mind, we're finishing this draft with rounding out with one more of these kind of late flyer QBs in like the 19th to 20th round, as well as another tight end in the 19th or 20th. That gives us 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 6 rounds to basically just hammer running backs and wide receivers going forward. All right, DPJ goes, Juwan Johnson goes. We'll grab Zay Jones here. So just making sure from a stack standpoint, Tampa, nothing really there. Philly, nothing really here. Bryce, you could be looking at Carolina. You could be looking at Houston. I'm going to grab Zay. I think there's a bit of a tier break for Zay above those others and the lack of the true known, whether it's Carolina or Houston. I do think most likely situation is Bryce goes to Houston. I guess the betting markets are still aligned on that after C.J. Stroud got the early push from Carolina. So we will keep an eye on guys like Nico Collins, maybe even Mechie later on for that potential stack. But yeah, other than the Baker and Evans, that's really the only stack we have here, which I don't love. We could grab like a Cade Otton with our last round pick to get you more of the Tampa stack. The Eagles, I mean, if you miss out on the first 2, it's really not easy to get stack partners. So we may end up just with a naked Jalen Hurts, which of QBs to be naked on, that is perfectly okay. But I will say, like, in general, I am very much on the pro stacking side of things. If you have not looked at Leone's Twitter thread from yesterday and then accompanying article, he's been doing a lot of work in the lab around actually, there's a lot of stuff he's been doing around kind of the best ball strategy aspects, taking a data first approach. He and I have been talking about this one for a little bit, and the inspiration was like, I was going into this year feeling that, like, hey, I actually think stacking is even more important than the market kind of assesses. And a lot of that being around kind of, hey, what we're seeing, the necessity of what you need to advance, especially in that final week, stacking, game stacking and such. And I know the market talks a lot about it, but my theory is that, like, hey, it's actually more important than that. And Leone about 2, maybe 3 years ago did some assessment on like how important is stacking from an advance rate standpoint and found that, yes, there is a little bit of value, but you don't want to give up more than like a round of ADP to get that stack. Or maybe it was like a round of ADP in a combo of the stack. So combining the quarterback and the wide receiver or the tight end. But then this year really looked a bit more into what that actually looks like from a impact and expected value to finals, advancing each part. So highly recommend checking that out. Overall, the TLDR is that, yes, it is very important. It is important to multi-stack as well. If you have 2 QBs, stack both QBs. If you have 3, stack all 3 of them. And so that's one thing I'm going to continue to be leaning into. Game stacks as well. Saw some positive correlation there as well. And yeah, I think overall it was a really cool methodology that he used, where rather than just being limited to weeks 15, 16, 17 and a small sample size of there, basically assumes that, hey, every week, looking at the data for every single week, thinking, hey, if this was, it basically increases the sample size. So week 3, what happened? Week 4, what happened? Week 5, what happened? Even though there's not actually fantasy playoffs for those, it gives us the idea of like, hey, does stacking actually get you those top 1% outcomes or whatever it is you need to advance in the playoffs or finish at the top of the bunny for the prize pool. So check that out. It's going to be part of a larger best ball manifesto that I think he's working on. So keep an eye out there. All right, let me put this back in the draft board, get a little more, and yeah, I mean, we talked about the QB aspect, but look how, QB's obviously slowed down so much because we're now to the point of like, hey, I mentioned Baker Mayfield's getting drafted as QB 32. I think actually he was probably drafted as like 31 in this one. Then we just have none of these QBs drafted. So it turns into after that is who do you want to make bets on? But you really do not need to take those kind of bets until like the final round or 2 or 3 rounds. So a lot of it now is just stacking up your QBs, getting some upside at other positions, getting some depth. Really just a ton of kind of flyers in this range. But we'll see what we're able to kind of put together. So in 6 picks, we jump back. I saw another one. Josh saying he's in the 9 hole, feeling all right, having Lamar and Jones with the rushing ability, finding it hard to get stacks now. Yeah, I mean, hey, I don't mind Lamar and Daniel Jones, as I mentioned. I do think I think that Daniel Jones is where you are. Daniel Jones does have that rushing ability, so I like that aspect definitely. Yeah, for those. So Mark Andrews would have been 53. Maybe you probably would have taken him if he fell to you at 57. You could have grabbed him at 40. But that would have been a major reach. Breece Hall definitely a tier above from running backs that would have been available here. Daniel Jones, though. Daniel Jones, you got lots of stack partners because it just takes a while for them to fall to fruit to get to you. But really, other than Waller, who goes like in the 8th tier, you got Wan'Dale Robinson, you got Isaiah Hodgins, you've got the plethora of all those other wide receivers. Who's actually going to hit? Is the ball going to be spread out too much? I don't know. But at least with the Daniel Jones, like, hey, you've got a lot of time later in the draft to kind of just pepper your stack partners. Okay, coming back around in 2 picks. What do we want from a positional standpoint? So again, as we were saying, like, hey, the next 5 picks or so are just going to be running backs on wide receivers. No point in reaching on a QB, and there's too much value in my mind in the last round or 2 for tight ends to worry about that. So here we are just going to be going for wide receivers and running backs. Let's go with DJ Chark to start off. Potential that it turns into a stack with Bryce Young if he ends up going 1 overall to Carolina or if there's a trade. And falls again. We can also go with Nico Collins with the 2nd pick. Yes, a bit of a reach, but from a projections wise and ETR rankings, we do have Nico. We are very bullish on him. And hey, when you combine that with it'd be another potential stack for Bryce if he ends up going to Houston instead, which I think is the most likely. We can grab that there. Running backs wise in this spot, I do like Jaylen Warren a lot. I do think like he's going to have a consistent role in Pittsburgh and has an actual opportunity to outplay Najee to become the starter. So I am overweight on Jaylen Warren. If wanted to give that context as well. I really do like him. But I still probably in this situation will go with Nico just because we are really strong at running back. And I do want another potential stack. If Bryce goes to Houston, at least gives us 1 stack partner. So I think between DJ Chark and Nico, we're almost guaranteed to have a stack partner for Bryce come playoff time. So that's good. Yeah, I mean, sure, Texans are going to draft at least 1 wide receiver, but no one really scares me of like in this year's draft from a wide receiver standpoint outside of like, JSN. I mean, honestly, like if you told me Addison, if you told me Quentin Johnston, if you told me Zay Flowers, like they actually took 6-8 weeks to really come into their spot in the offenses, like I wouldn't be shocked. This is, I'm a little lower on this crop of wide receivers. So I don't think there's a main point here is I don't think there's a major risk that like Nico's not going to, get his targets, get his, trying to think like Robert Woods is probably one that I could see like, hey, they start with Robert Woods a little more in the year, let that rookie that rookie then starts eating more into Robert Woods's targets. Because what does Robert Woods really do in that offense anyways? Obviously, this team is not going to be like a Super Bowl, probably not even a playoff contender. Makes far more sense to kind of have your Nico Collins, have your rookie, have your young guys grow. Robert Woods can be a bit of a veteran presence. He definitely, I think Robert Woods' best value to that offense is going to be to Bryce Young or CJ Stroud or whoever the quarterback is, providing him with just kind of a bit of a reliable veteran presence to help that QB development. But if they do take a wide receiver, like that's the one that's going to be eating into the playing time. I think Nico would still play in 2 wide receiver sets. Robert Woods then maybe would either just lose his playing time or play a bit more of the slot, which we did see him play some of the slot for the Rams back in the day. Not much in Tennessee, but that's not too surprising given their wide receiver core. Will Westbrook-Ikhine play next year? I have no idea. Let's see what that's looking like. I've not a player that I've drafted at all. Yeah. What's the reason for the ask? Curious there. If I take a look, like what is ADP of 239.9, basically not being drafted at all. Yeah. Treylon Burks, though. Treylon Burks should be fun in Tennessee. Yeah, I mean, I think we're really curious who's going to be the quarterback in Tennessee. There's been a bit more rumbles lately that like it may not be Ryan Tannehill this year. Whether that means that they are trading up to get a QB, whether they're going to trade for a QB, could see them something like, I know New England's been shopping Mac Jones, like bringing in a Mac Jones type or something like that. I'll take Willis and Ikhine stacks in the 19th and 20th. Hey, best of luck. I was pretty bullish on Malik Willis not bullish, but I was definitely, from a fantasy standpoint, drafting Malik Willis in some 20th rounders last year. And the rookies and sophomores, I had a lot of him. But it looks ugly. When they play, what was it? Was Dobbs? When they chose Dobbs off the streets to play above Malik Willis. And then the few times we did see Malik Willis play, like, I just don't think he's got it. And I think we as fantasy analysts were very bullish on the possibility and the upside. And then the draft happens and the draft capital was like, oh, okay, coaches are seeing something we didn't. Maybe we should kind of bring that into play. Then we see him actually on the field. Not good. Looked very, very bad. Then we see them bringing in Dobbs to play ahead of him. Like, we've got to take the signals. Eventually, like, hey, there are enough kind of flags. The coaches are trying to tell us something. I'm now over the, okay, I hear you. I am out on Willis. But yes, it is very unique. And if it's somehow works out and he ends up turning that rushing, like, this is the tournament to do it. Because him in the 20th in a normal tournament doesn't matter much. Him in the 20th here, if he actually started playing, that could be huge for your team, depending on the composition of your team as well. Okay. Coming back around to us, we are getting... So one thing to note is these late rounds as well is like when we do the 20-round underdog tournaments, we basically, all the legitimate running backs, all the running backs, are basically taken. In the Superflex, it's the same thing because we still need to play that same amount. In the 20-round wide receivers, your very last round wide receivers, like, you're not even sure if you're getting playing time. You're looking at like Corey Davis and trying to feel excited about it. But in these structure, your wide receivers at the very end, you've actually got guys like maybe a Terrace Marshall, maybe Van Jefferson, Robert Woods, like guys who we actually expect to have playing time because people are kind of letting those wide receivers fall because they're not needing as many of them. So when I get to like these 15, 16, 17 round, I'm like, hey, you know what? It makes more sense for me to kind of grab the running backs because this is like the last chance to get guys that we either think will have a role or have some form of an upside. And then in the later, maybe the 18th, 19th is when you can kind of then focus on those wide receivers. All right. However, I say all that and we're in a bit of an ugly area right now. I think we'll grab Hunter Renfrow. Could go Hunter Renfrow. I'm going to grab. We could have gone Robert Woods to get more of that Bryce Young stack aspect, but I think just the Hunter Renfrow upside scenario is substantially higher than what we'd be getting out of Robert Woods, and we do have Devontae Adams here as well. So maybe that's a bet that Jacoby Myers ends up being a very irrelevant, doesn't play much, maybe gets hurt. And as a result, both Devontae and Renfrow kind of get a leg up. It's a bit of a stack aspect without having Jimmy G in the stack in there with them. Okay, Terrell Davis, tell me why Deshaun Watson is not the biggest value this year. Okay, so two things there. One is, first off, from a Superflex standpoint, he is being drafted at 12, which is pick 11 or 12, which is the same round that other people are getting these elite QBs that have potentially higher upside and expectation of reaching it and their average. So it's hard for anyone to be like a complete steal in the Superflex standpoint when you're still being drafted, in the first, at the end of the first round. That said, I think it just comes down to if we get the Deshaun Watson from 2-3 years ago, he was a top 3, top 5 QB. Yeah, not Superflex. We're in Superflex. I'm still talking about it, but anyway, this will still work. If we get that same Deshaun Watson that's top 3, top 5 at his position, has that rushing upside, he is an absolute steal at where he's going. What's his ADP in traditional Underdog? I think it was something around 9. It's probably around 80 or something. I think it was right next to Dak. But everything we saw last year looked bad. I'm willing to believe that him getting an entire season with the team, a full year of the offseason, getting the practice, getting the reps, them actually shaping the offense to his strengths, which we saw the coaching staff kind of talk about in the offseason, that they really need to make sure that hey, Deshaun Watson is a reason why he's had superstar years in the past, why we're paying him so much. We need to make sure that our offense aligns to it. I think the Elijah Moore trade is a way that kind of shows hey, this team is willing to be a bit more pass heavy. We'll see whether they bring back Kareem Hunt or such. But I think just in general, this is going to be a bit more of a pass heavy offense. So I'm bullish. I'm definitely, I think Deshaun Watson is a great risk reward style pick. In general, I've got a decent amount of him in these two. I wouldn't call him a steal in this, but definitely in a traditional Underdog. It'll be interesting to track his ADP and movement because yes, we know in his range of outcomes is amazing top 3, top 5 QB fantasy seasons. Obviously though, but if you look at all the stats from last year, he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. And so which one are we going to get? I think that comes into play, and that's obviously just a bet. It's a risk. And so here's another thing, if you say Deshaun Watson is pick 80 and Trey Lance is pick 140, which is approximately where I think Trey Lance is going to be going in Underdog draft when we go back to the, Best Ball Mania, unless there's more QB news out there. Is Trey Lance's upside higher than Deshaun Watson? It's probable. It's possible. I'd say it's probable. If you knew that Trey Lance was going to start every game and you're getting him, 4, 5, 6, 5 rounds past where Deshaun Watson is. So in that situation, maybe actually Trey Lance is the better steal. But from a risk standpoint, we know Deshaun Watson is going to be the QB. We know, assuming health, he's going to play every single game. Trey Lance may literally not play a game. So again, you have the elite QBs at the top that have the elite upside and minimal to no risk. You then around pick 80 have elite upside, but decent risk on if he actually hits that upside. And then you have in pick 140 Trey Lance, where elite upside, but extremely high risk that he may not, maybe a 0 for your team all year. Those are kind of the situations that we need to be considering when you're thinking about drafting. Obviously, it's got to fit with the rest of your lineup, but I'm in the camp that hey, I'm willing to take some zeros. I'm willing to fail on some of these. I want those elite upside when those seasons happen. That's what you're going to need. So I will have Deshaun Watson. I will have a decent amount of Trey Lance as things stand right now. And as most hey, Trey Lance for the big board Underdog tournament from earlier is my highest owned QB because I do think that like, hey, that upside scenario is just too valuable. And so we'll see what ends up happening there, obviously. Okay, 18, 19, 20, 3 picks left. As I mentioned before, I still kind of want to get another QB because I think just the grabbing a fourth QB this late that has the level of, I think it's just very, very valuable compared to what you're getting out of these other players for if you actually hit on it. So in one of these next 3 picks, we'll be doing that. We do still need a tight end. Lots of tight ends available still that I think like have just decent projections or maybe even some upside like a Zach Ertz one. We have the Cade Otton situation as well with the Baker. We can do that for the stack. I don't hate that. And then the last roster spot we can kind of just fill out. So I'm looking at the QB position here. Taylor Heineke is the guy that I like to go for. We've been talking about him throughout this draft. I think Taylor Heineke will play some games this year. Wouldn't surprise, and he looked pretty decent in his games in the past. So I'm going to go with that. We'll grab Taylor Heineke. Gives us a fourth QB that can hopefully get some spot starts and maybe support us for that second QB position. Then from a tight end, I'm going to lean Cade Otton here for the stack with Baker. If we don't get Cade, I think Hunter Henry is probably a safer, better projection than Cade Otton. So we'll back ourselves into that one. But if it doesn't happen, I think it's better to focus on the stack partner here. And the final pick of the draft, we'll plug in either a running back or a wide receiver. We shall see. But let us now take a look. We were talking about earlier at the Jay Connolly team. Let's see what this team ended up turning into. So, nope, I don't want Hunter Henry. I want Cade Otton. All right, get rid of that. Let's go all the way to Jay Connolly. So Jay Connolly has the 4 QBs: Watson, Prescott, Russ, Gino. All right. Then he goes Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy to get his wide receivers. Damian Pierce, J.K. Dobbins, Rashad White, Brandon Cooks. It's going to keep happening. Let's go back to here. Grabs 2 wide receiver, grabs 3 running backs, grabs 2 more wide receivers. Schultz, Gesicki, and Noah Fant and Gerald Everett. So 4 tight ends. 4 tight ends kind of fairly early. Or not early, mid rounds. It's just tough. Like, I don't see anything on this team that's elite. Like, trying to think, like, what positions does Jay Connolly win in these drafts? I mean, you're hoping he wins at QB, but if we compare, is he beating Jalen Hurts, Bryce Young, and Baker? Is he beating Mahomes, Jordan Love, and Desmond Ridder? He's not beating Fields, Cousins, and CJ Stroud, in my opinion. I mean, unless like Deshaun Watson has that huge year. But if he has that huge year, do you need these other QBs? So I'm saying like he's going to be strong at QB, but he's definitely not like elite at it. But then he's way behind the 8 ball at every other position. And so I think that's where this is kind of educational, at least from my opinion. That is not a strategy that I would want to employ by going that heavily. But it's interesting to see how it worked out. I don't know if Connolly is in here or anyone else. Like, hey, no shame or anything like that. It's always great to kind of try different strategies, but not something that would be using in the future. Okay. These drafts take, wow, we are at 1 hour and 10 and we filled it fairly quickly. But yeah, we'll round out through some chat questions. Anything else here? Any final questions? Let me know. Otherwise, as I mentioned, check out that thread that I put on Twitter. If you can give it some love, give it a like, give it a retweet. I can post the link here once more. Would appreciate that. Also, like the stream, give it a comment, say hi, do all those things that help the algorithm and keep ETR and the bosses upstairs happy. Always fun coming to you all. We'll continue to do this throughout the summer. We are 3 or so weeks away from the NFL draft. So I'm sure we'll have another Superflex draft or 2, depending on when this fills. I think we could probably get another 1 or 2 in. And then I think shortly after the NFL draft goes, we're going to have BBM season, and it's going to be fun. That's when we'll be bringing on all the guests like we did last year. Can't wait to kind of bring on a lot of these are friends. A lot of these people are people that I truly respect and their opinions and their perspectives. Learn a lot from them. I know all of you, and I hope all of you all do as well. So it should be fun. But yeah, let's round out any other final questions that you all have around how many drafts will you do this year, including playoffs? Oh God, I don't know, probably 2,000-3,000. I think I'll probably end up with about 1,000 regular season ones. 1,000 playoffs. No, there's not enough play. I mean, there's a lot of playoff ones. Maybe 1,500 to 2,000. That'd probably be my guess. I'm at around like 350 to 400 right now. So I'm guessing there's going to be a lot more of these. I don't, so yeah, I would guess around 1,500 to 2,000. How do you feel about fading elite QB this year, non-Superflex? I've faded him pretty much going in early on. I'm okay with it. I think early on it was a lot better to fade them because the 20 rounds, you could very comfortably go 3 QBs and you weren't giving much up. We'll see where their ADP settles come BBM. And because I prefer to go with a bit more of a 2 QB there, or at least I'm more with these 20 rounds. I almost never went 2 QB. With traditional 18 round, I do a little more 2 QB. I still probably keep around like maybe 60-40 towards the 3 QB. So we'll see. I'd say I won't be doing a complete full fade, but I'm not targeting them, if that makes sense. Yes. Okay, taking a look. Yeah, a well-rounded team. I think so. And I think, I'm not, obviously when you get that first overall, when you get those kind of one of the first elite ones, the 3, it's so much easier to have that well-rounded team. But I wouldn't even call my team well-rounded. I think just when you have the ability to be like, hey, this could be QB1, that could be running back 1, that could be wide receiver 1. And I'm happy to punt, perfectly content punting the tight end position if I don't get like a very elite one. These are the kind of teams that I really like to build. I wouldn't be shocked, hey, as long as we can, out of this, maybe if Baker can start the whole year, Bryce overperforms, this could definitely be a team that wins the league, advances, and is competitive in the playoffs. We're set up pretty well. I like it. Let's see. Yeah, I wish it was 18 rounds. Yeah, hey, Superflex makes sense to have 20. I get it. Also, the rest of the drafts before the NFL draft, I get them being 20 rounds. Gives a little more kind of, protect injuries and such. But I'll be happy when we go back to the 18 round drafts when the real best ball season post NFL draft really kicks off. All right, this was fun. We will finish it out. What position do we want to go with the final pick? Running back just gets really ugly, but you can kind of grab someone that you think, is not being drafted much, has some upside. We talked about Kenny McIntosh previously. I think McBride's another example, or backs that may find their way into actually a workhorse role, but are not being drafted much. Could go with a 4th tight end. No, I don't think it's as necessary with this. Is there a stack partner that we want to look for here? You can go Russell Gage for the Tampa. I don't hate that. If I'm looking at running back, wide receiver, are we stronger or lighter in one? Devontae is great. I think we go with a running back. That's not being drafted much. I don't want to do Chase Edmonds. Let's go with Kenny McIntosh. Just gives us some uniqueness with some RB upside in case something magical happens there. Okay. This has been fun. Thanks everyone for joining in chat. Hope you guys got some value out of it. I am going to go grab some food, sit on my couch, watch the Masters. It is a fantastic time to be a sports fan, and just, that Masters app is just fantastic. Everyone else, enjoy the rest of your Thursday, your weekend, watching some golf, and I will be back. I may not be here next Thursday. I'm traveling. I'm actually going to go golf with CSU, visit Levitan out in Denver, hang out there, and then I think I might be traveling. So I might be taking a week off next week. But don't worry, I'll be back soon. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks, everyone. Later.